The morning sun painted the Korean countryside in golden hues as 8-year-old Ji-won helped his father Min-soo tend to their small vegetable garden. The boy loved these quiet moments before the world woke up. His mother Hana was already preparing breakfast in their simple farmhouse. The smell of rice and soup drifted through the open windows. Ji-won had always been different from other children in their village. While other kids played games, he would sit quietly and watch everything around him. His dark eyes seemed to see things that adults missed. His parents often said he was too serious for such a young boy. The year was 2387 and humanity had just learned to travel between the stars. Most people on Earth barely understood what this meant. They still lived simple lives in small communities like the one where Ji-won grew up. The government said there were other worlds out there, but life here remained the same. That peaceful morning was about to end forever. Min-soo straightened up from pulling weeds and looked at the sky. Something was wrong. The birds had stopped singing. Even the insects seemed to have gone quiet. A shadow passed over the sun, but there were no clouds in the clear blue sky. Ji-won followed his father's gaze upward. What he saw made his stomach twist with fear. A massive dark ship hung in the air above their village. It was shaped like no aircraft he had ever seen. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. More ships appeared. They seemed to materialize out of nothing. Within seconds, the sky was filled with these alien vessels. They blocked out the sun and cast the village into an unnatural twilight. Hana rushed outside when she heard the commotion. Other villagers were pointing at the sky and shouting. Children were crying. Dogs were barking and running in circles. Everyone knew something terrible was about to happen. The ships descended with a sound like thunder mixed with metal scraping against metal. When they landed, the ground shook. Ji-won grabbed his father's hand as dust and debris filled the air. Strange creatures emerged from the ships. They walked on 6 legs like giant insects. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that gleamed like black metal. Multiple eyes dotted their heads and their mouths open to reveal rows of sharp teeth. They carried weapons that crackled with blue energy. These were the Valkyrie raiders. They had come to harvest humans. The aliens moved with terrifying efficiency. They surrounded the village in minutes. When people tried to run, the creatures fired their weapons. Blue beams of light struck down anyone who moved too fast. The fallen humans did not die, but lay twitching on the ground, unable to move. Min-soo pushed Ji-won behind him and picked up a farming tool. It was a pitiful weapon against the aliens, but he was not going to let them take his family without a fight. Hana grabbed a kitchen knife and stood beside her husband. They formed a protective barrier in front of their son. The lead Valkyrie approached their house. This one was larger than the others and wore what looked like armor decorated with strange symbols. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal mixed with the buzz of angry insects. Humans will come with us now. Resistance brings pain. Cooperation brings quick harvest. Min-soo raised his farming tool. You will not take my family. Sue, alien leader, tilted its head. Multiple eyes focused on the human father. This one shows fighting spirit. Mark him for priority extraction. Min-soo charged at the creature. His farming tool struck the alien's armored shell and bounced off harmlessly. The Valkyrie backhanded him with casual ease. The blow sent Min-soo flying across their small yard. He hit the wall of their house and did not get up. Hana screamed and ran to her husband. The aliens let her check on him. Min-soo was still breathing, but blood ran from his mouth. His eyes found Ji-won and he tried to speak. Only blood came out. 2 more Valkyrie moved toward Ji-won. The boy stood frozen as the creatures approached. Their multiple eyes studied him like he was some interesting specimen. One of them made clicking sounds that might have been communications, so alien leader moved closer to examine the child. Its eyes reflected an intelligence that was completely foreign to anything human. When it spoke again, it seemed almost curious. This small one shows no fear response. Unusual. Most human young ones make noise and leak water from their eyes. Ji-won stared back at the creature. He was terrified, but something deep inside him refused to show weakness. He had watched his father fight and die protecting his family. He would not dishonor that sacrifice by cowering. "Take me instead," Ji-won said in a clear voice. "Leave my parents alone." The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "Small human thinks it can bargain. Interesting. This one may have value beyond standard harvest parameters." Hana tried to reach her son, but other aliens held her back. "Ji-won, run," she screamed. "Run away from here." The boy looked at his mother. One last time. He memorized her face streaked with tears and dirt. He looked at his father, who was trying to crawl toward them despite his injuries. Ji-won knew he would never see them again, but he also knew running was useless. The Velkari leader gestured and 2 soldiers grabbed Ji-won. The boy did not struggle. He kept his eyes on the alien leader as they carried him toward their ship. "This one will be designated for advanced research protocols," the leader said. "Mark specimen as priority asset. High adaptation potential detected." As they loaded Ji-won into their ship, he saw other villagers being herded into different vessels. Old people and those who could not work were left behind. Only the young and strong were taken. The aliens wanted healthy specimens for whatever they had planned. The ship door closed with a sound like a tomb sealing. Ji-won found himself in a metal cage with other captured humans. Among them, he recognized Han-woo, who had been a soldier before he retired to farm. There was also Suman, who worked as an engineer in the nearby town. Hyun-woo looked at the boy with sad eyes. "I am sorry, little one. We could not protect you." Ji-won sat down in the corner of the cage. He did not cry. He did not speak. Instead, he watched everything around him and committed it all to memory. The layout of the ship, the way the aliens moved and communicated, the weapons they carried. Somewhere deep in his 8-year-old mind, a plan was already forming. These creatures had taken him from his family and destroyed his world. Someday he would make them pay for what they had done. The ship lifted off, and Ji-won felt the pull of gravity as they left Earth behind. Through a small window, he could see his home planet growing smaller. Smoke rose from burning villages across the surface. The Velkari had harvested thousands of humans that day. They thought they were taking helpless specimens for their research. They had no idea they had just captured the one human who would eventually bring down their entire civilization. Ji-won pressed his small hand against the cold metal wall of his cage and made a silent promise to his dead parents. He would survive whatever these creatures had planned. He would grow strong, and someday he would return to settle the score. The dragon was about to be forged in the fires of alien experimentation. 3 years had passed since the Velkari took Ji-won from his home. The boy who once helped his father in the garden was now 11 years old and trapped in Research Station Epsilon 7. This massive structure floated in deep space far from any star or planet. Here the Velkari conducted their most important experiments on captured species. Ji-won woke up in his metal cell as he did every day. The walls were covered in scratch marks that he had made to count the days. Over 1,000 marks covered the surface now. Each mark represented another day of survival in this nightmare place. His body had changed during these 3 years. The constant experiments had made him taller and stronger than he should be at his age. Strange chemicals injected into his blood had given him faster reflexes and sharper senses. His wounds healed quicker than they should. Even his mind worked differently now. But the most important change was in his eyes. They burned with a cold hatred that frightened even the Velkari scientists who studied him daily. This human child refused to break no matter what they did to him. The cell door opened with a hiss of compressed air. 2 Velkari guards entered, followed by the lead scientist, Thrixval. This creature had personally overseen most of Ji-won's torture sessions. It carried a data pad and made notes about everything it observed. Subject 24601 shows continued resistance to standard braking protocols, Thrixval said in its grinding mechanical voice. Today we will test pain tolerance levels using the neural disruptor. Ji-won stood up slowly. He had learned to show no fear even when his heart pounded with terror. The aliens fed on fear and weakness. He would give them nothing. They strapped him to a metal table in the main laboratory. Dozens of other Velkari scientists gathered to observe. The neural disruptor was a device that sent waves of agony directly into the nervous system. Most creatures passed out within seconds of activation. Thrixval activated the machine. Pain beyond description flooded through G1's body. Every nerve felt like it was on fire. His muscles convulsed and his vision went white. But he did not scream. He had learned long ago that screaming only made them increase the intensity. Instead, G1 focused his mind on memories of home. He pictured his father's face and his mother's gentle hands. He remembered the smell of their kitchen and the sound of birds singing in the morning. These memories became his anchor in the storm of pain. After 10 minutes, the machine shut off. Most test subjects were unconscious by this point. G1 remained awake and stared directly at Thrixaval. His young face showed nothing but contempt. Fascinating, the alien scientist muttered. Pain threshold exceeds all previous measurements. This specimen adapts to stimuli at an unprecedented rate. They returned G1 to his cell where other human prisoners waited. Hyunwoo, the former soldier, looked terrible. The aliens had been testing his combat reflexes by forcing him to fight hungry alien beasts. His body was covered in bite marks and claw wounds. Suman, the engineer, was worse. They had been probing her brain with electrical devices trying to understand human creativity and problem-solving. She often stared at nothing and spoke in broken sentences. But there were new faces, too. Daiho was a scientist who had been captured 6 months ago. The aliens wanted to study human intelligence and learning capacity. They forced him to solve complex puzzles while they monitored his brain activity. Yuna was a pilot who had been taken when her ship was attacked near the outer colonies. She was only 19 but had become like an older sister to G1. The aliens tested her spatial awareness and reaction time by putting her through deadly flight simulations. "How did it go today, little brother?" Yuna whispered when G1 returned. To their shared cell block. "They are learning about our pain responses," G1 replied quietly. "But I am learning about them too." This was true. While the Velkari studied humans, G1 studied them right back. He memorized their schedules and routines. He learned their language by listening to their conversations. He observed their technology and tried to understand how it worked. The boy had discovered that the Velkari were not as superior as they believed. They were creatures of rigid habits and predictable behavior patterns. They could not adapt quickly to new situations. This would be their weakness. During the night hours when the station lights dimmed, G1 would move carefully through the ventilation system. He had found ways to reach other parts of the facility. There, he would help other prisoners when he could. He brought food to those who were being starved. He shared medicine with those who were sick. He whispered encouragement to those who were losing hope. The other humans began to see him as their unofficial leader despite his young age. The aliens noticed these activities but could not understand them. Why would one test subject risk punishment to help others? This behavior made no sense according to their scientific models. Thrixaval increased the intensity of G1's experiments. They subjected him to extreme temperatures that should have killed him. They exposed him to toxic gases and deadly radiation. They made him fight against alien predators with his bare hands. Each test was designed to find his breaking point. Each test failed to break him. Instead, G1 grew stronger and more dangerous with every passing day. The aliens began injecting him with genetic modifications taken from other species. They gave him the night vision of cave dwellers. They enhanced his muscle density using samples from heavy world inhabitants. They improved his reflexes with neural boosters designed for their own soldiers. They thought they were creating the perfect test subject. They were actually forging the weapon that would destroy them. G1 began having dreams during this time. He dreamed of leading human armies against alien fleets. He saw himself standing over the broken bodies of Velkari scientists. Most clearly, he dreamed of returning to Earth as a liberator rather than a victim. These were not just dreams. They were visions of the future that his enhanced mind was beginning to predict. The experiments had awakened something in him that the aliens could not measure or understand. During one particularly brutal session, they connected his brain directly to their computer systems. They wanted to map human neural pathways and download his memories for study. But the connection worked both ways. For a few seconds, G1 had access to the station's main database. He learned the location of other research facilities. He discovered the names and locations of high-ranking Velkari officials. Most importantly, He learned about their military weaknesses and technological limitations. When they disconnected him, Ji-won pretended to be unconscious. The aliens discussed their findings openly, believing he could not hear them. They spoke about expansion plans and future raids on human colonies. They mentioned weapons development and alliance structures with other alien species. All of this information was stored in Ji-won's enhanced memory for future use. That night he gathered the other human prisoners in secret. He shared what he had learned and began forming the first plans for escape. Not just escape for themselves, but liberation, for all humans held captive across the galaxy. They think we are just animals to be studied, Ji-won told his fellow prisoners. They have no idea what they have created here. Hyunwoo looked at the boy with new respect. You have changed, Ji-won. There is something different in your eyes now. Yes, Ji-won replied with a cold smile. I am no longer the frightened child they captured. I am becoming something they will learn to fear. The dragon was growing stronger in the fires of alien cruelty. Ji-won was now 11 years old, but his mind worked like that of a seasoned military commander. The alien experiments had changed him in ways the Valkyrie could never have predicted. Tonight would be the night he had planned for months. Tonight, they would escape from Research Station Epsilon 7. The boy moved silently through the ventilation shafts he knew better than any blueprint. His enhanced hearing picked up every sound in the station. The night shift had fewer guards, and most of the scientists were sleeping. This was their best chance. He reached the cell where Yuna and the other humans were kept. Using tools he had stolen and modified over many weeks, he opened the electronic locks. The other prisoners looked at him with hope and fear mixed together. Tonight we leave this place, Ji-won whispered. Stay close and do exactly what I say. Hyunwoo, the former soldier, nodded. What about the guards and the security systems? Ji-won smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I have been studying them for 3 years. I know all their weaknesses now. The group moved through corridors that Ji-won had mapped completely. He led them to a maintenance section where other alien species were held captive. The Valkyrie had been experimenting on many different races, not just humans. There were the Keth who looked like large cats with silver fur. There were the Morvac who had blue skin and 4 arms. There were even some Zephyrians who could change the color of their skin. All of these species had been tortured and studied just like the humans. We free them all, Ji-won said quietly. Every prisoner in this station comes with us. Suman looked worried. That will make us easier to track and harder to hide. No, Ji-won replied. It will make us stronger, and it will hurt them more. Using his stolen access codes, Ji-won opened cell after cell. Soon nearly 200 prisoners of different species were following him through the station corridors. The boy had become their leader without anyone questioning it. They reached the hangar bay where the Valkyrie kept their smaller ships. Ji-won had studied these vessels during his secret explorations. He knew which ones had faster engines and better weapons. The first alarm sounded as they entered the hangar. Red lights flashed and the mechanical voice of the station computer began announcing the escape attempt. Valkyrie guards came running from all directions. Yuna, get the ships ready, Ji-won ordered. Hyunwoo and Daeho help her. Everyone else follow me. The boy ran toward the station's main power core. He had planted explosive devices there during previous visits. The aliens had taught him about their technology through their experiments. Now he would use that knowledge against them. Valkyrie soldiers fired their energy weapons at the escaping prisoners. But Ji-won had planned for this too. He had sabotaged their weapon systems earlier. Many of the guns overheated and exploded in the soldiers' hands. The power core detonated just as Ji-won reached the hangar again. Lights went out across the station. Emergency systems activated, but they were damaged and unreliable. In the darkness and confusion, the prisoners boarded the stolen ships. Ji-won took control of the lead vessel. His enhanced reflexes and stolen knowledge made him a better pilot than most adults. The other ships followed his lead as they blasted out of the hangar bay. Research Station Epsilon 7 exploded behind them as secondary systems overloaded. The facility that had tortured so many innocent beings was now nothing but expanding debris in space. Ji-won watched it burn with satisfaction. The journey back to Earth took weeks. During this time, Jiwan learned more about the other species they had rescued. Each race had valuable knowledge about Velkari operations and weaknesses. The boy stored all of this information in his enhanced memory. When they finally reached Earth orbit, Jiwan was shocked by what he found. His homeworld was under partial occupation by alien forces. The human government had signed treaties that gave the Velkari legal right to take prisoners for research. "They sold us out," Hyunwoo said bitterly as they read the official documents. "Our own leaders traded human lives for promises of peace." Jiwan felt his anger grow even stronger. The aliens were bad enough, but humans who would collaborate with them were worse. These weak politicians had learned nothing from history. The returning prisoners were taken to a processing facility where government officials questioned them. The bureaucrats wanted to know everything about their captivity, but they also wanted to keep the information secret from the public. "We cannot let this story become widely known," said Director Kim, who ran the facility. "It would cause panic and might damage our peace negotiations." Jiwon stared at the man with contempt. "You mean it would show people what cowards you are?" The director looked uncomfortable. "You are just a child. You do not understand the complexities of interstellar politics." "I understand that you are afraid," Jiwon replied. "And I understand that fear makes people do terrible things." That night, Jiwon escaped from the government facility. He had no trouble avoiding their security systems after dealing with alien technology for 3 years. He disappeared into Earth's underground networks where resistance groups operated in secret. The resistance was led by people like Taewon, who had been an admiral before the government signed the surrender treaties. There was also Ji-young, who had been a military strategist before she was forced into hiding. These resistance fighters had been waiting for someone like Ji-won, someone who understood alien technology and psychology, someone who had seen their enemies up close and learned their weaknesses. "The boy is too young for this kind of responsibility," some of the resistance members argued. Taewon studied Ji-won carefully. "Look at his eyes. This is not a normal child. The aliens created something they did not intend to create." Ji-won began sharing everything he had learned during his captivity. He taught them about Velkari military tactics and technology. He explained how their rigid thinking could be exploited. He showed them plans for weapons that could defeat alien armor. More importantly, he gave them hope. For the first time since the occupation began, humans had someone who truly understood their enemy. Someone who had survived the worst they could, do and come back stronger. "We will not just fight for Earth," Jiwon told the resistance leaders. "We will fight for every world they have conquered, every species they have enslaved. This will not end until they are completely defeated." The resistance members looked at each other with new understanding. This boy was not talking about simple revenge or even liberation. He was talking about total war against an entire galactic empire. "That is impossible," someone said. "They have thousands of worlds and millions of ships." Jiwon smiled, and for a moment he looked like the child he had once been. Then his expression hardened and became something that would have frightened seasoned warriors. "They said it was impossible for a human child to survive their experiments," he replied. "They said it was impossible for prisoners to escape their best research station. They were wrong about both of those things." He looked around, the room at the assembled resistance fighters. "We will prove them wrong about this too. But first we need to make humans remember how to fight." The boy who had been taken from a peaceful farm was now ready to wake up a sleeping world. The dragon had learned to breathe fire, and soon the galaxy would burn with the flames of human fury. Earth's governments might have surrendered, but Jiwon had other plans. The real war was about to begin. 5 years had passed since Jiwon's escape from the alien research station. Now 16 years old, he had become a legend whispered about in taverns and told around campfires across human space. They called him the Dragon, and alien soldiers feared that name more than any weapon. The resistance had grown from a few hundred fighters hiding in Earth's underground tunnels to a massive network spanning dozens of human colonies. Jiwon's tactical genius and intimate knowledge of alien weaknesses had transformed scattered rebel groups into a coordinated military force. He stood in the command center of their main base, hidden deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Holographic displays showed the locations of resistance cells across human space. Each group had been trained using the methods Jiwan had developed during his years of planning. Target confirmed, reported Sung-hoon, who had become Jiwan's most trusted lieutenant. The older man had been a colonial administrator before joining the resistance. His ability to inspire people and coordinate complex operations made him invaluable. The target was a Valkyrie processing facility on the colony world of New Seoul. Intelligence reports said they were holding over 3,000 human prisoners, there for shipment to research stations. This would be their largest rescue operation yet. Minji, have you finished analyzing their defense systems? Jiwan asked the young woman working at a bank of computers. Minji was only 18, but her genius, with alien technology, rivaled that of scientists twice her age. She had been captured once herself before Jiwan's forces rescued her. Now she used her skills to turn alien weapons against their creators. Their shield generators have the same weakness we found on the last 3 facilities, she reported. If we hit them with the modified pulse weapons at precisely the right frequency, the entire defensive grid will collapse. Jiwan nodded. The pulse weapons were his own design based on technology stolen from the research station. They exploited a flaw in Valkyrie energy systems that the aliens had never discovered, because they never expected their own technology to be used against them. What about civilian casualties? Asked Jiwan. Even in war, he refused to become like his enemies. The facility is isolated from the main colony, Sung-hoon replied. Our intelligence network confirms that only military targets and prisoners are in the strike zone. The intelligence network was another of Jiwan's innovations. Instead of relying on professional spies, he had recruited ordinary humans who lived under alien occupation. Shopkeepers and farmers and factory workers who passed information to the resistance while appearing to collaborate with their oppressors. Launch the operation, Jiwan ordered. The attack fleet consisted of modified human ships armed with weapons designed specifically to counter alien technology. Jiwan had learned that the key to defeating a superior enemy was not to fight them on equal terms, but to change the rules of engagement completely. The resistance ships approached New Seoul using stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured alien vessels. The Valkyrie sensors were designed to detect their own ship signatures. They had never adapted to threats that used their own invisibility methods against them. Jiwan piloted the lead assault ship himself. His enhanced reflexes and years of study made him one of the best combat pilots in human space. But more than that, his presence on the battlefield inspired his followers to fight harder than they ever thought possible. The first wave of pulse weapons struck the facility's shields exactly as planned. The defensive grid flickered and died, leaving the compound vulnerable. The second wave targeted the guard towers and weapon emplacements. Valkyrie soldiers rushed to defensive positions, but they were too late. Human strike teams had already landed and were advancing through the compound, using tactics that the aliens had never encountered before. Traditional military doctrine said that attackers needed numerical superiority to overcome prepared defenses. Jiwan had thrown out traditional doctrine. His fighters used speed and unpredictability instead of overwhelming force. Small teams of humans moved through the facility like ghosts. They struck at weak points that the aliens had never thought to protect. They used the enemy's own rigid command structure against them by creating chaos that their hierarchical system could not adapt to quickly enough. The rescue operation was completed in less than 2 hours. Over 3,000 human prisoners were freed and evacuated to safety. The facility itself was completely destroyed, along with valuable research data and equipment. Most importantly, not a single human life was lost in the operation. This was becoming Jiwan's signature. His forces struck with devastating effectiveness while protecting innocent lives on both sides whenever possible. The victory at New Seoul sent shockwaves through the alien occupation forces. For the first time, they were facing an enemy that could match their technology while surpassing their tactical flexibility. Reports of the raid reached every Valkyrie commander in human space. Back at the resistance base, Jiwan studied intelligence reports about alien reaction to the raid. The enemy was finally starting to take human resistance seriously. This was both good and dangerous. They are reinforcing their facilities, reported Changman, who ran intelligence operations for the resistance. Troop strength has doubled at every installation. And they are changing their communication protocols, added Su-young, who specialized in electronic warfare. Our ability to intercept their messages has been significantly reduced. Ji-won had expected this response. The aliens were adapting to his tactics just as he had adapted to their experiments years ago. This meant he needed to evolve his own methods, even faster. We need allies, he announced to his command staff. Human resistance alone is not enough to win this war. This was a radical idea. For centuries, humans had been told they were alone in the galaxy. The idea of forming alliances with other species seemed impossible to most people. What allies? Asked Sung-hoon. Every other species we know about is either part of the hegemony or enslaved by it. Exactly, Ji-won replied with one of his rare smiles. They are enslaved just like we were. That means they have every reason to join us against their oppressors. The intelligence they had gathered during raids showed that the Velkari and their allies had been enslaving species across the galaxy for thousands of years. Each conquered race provided something valuable. Some had advanced technology. Others had rare resources. Many were simply used as slave labor. The Keth have natural stealth abilities that make them perfect scouts, Ji-won explained. The Morvac have forearms, which makes them excellent engineers. The Zephyrians can blend into any environment. He had studied every alien species they had encountered during the escape from the research station. Each race had unique advantages that could benefit a resistance movement. More importantly, each race had suffered under hegemony rule just as humans had. But how do we contact them? Asked Minji. Most enslaved species are kept isolated on their homeworlds or work colonies. The same way we built our network among humans, Ji-won replied. One person at a time, one world at a time. We show them that resistance is possible. Over the following months, resistance operations expanded beyond simple raids on human facilities. Ji-won's forces began striking at alien installations that held other enslaved species. Each successful rescue mission brought new allies and new capabilities. The Keth brought knowledge of hegemony military tactics learned through centuries of forced service in alien armies. The Morvac contributed advanced manufacturing techniques that allowed the resistance to build better weapons and ships. The Zephyrians provided camouflage technology that made resistance bases nearly impossible to detect. Most importantly, each species brought their own anger and desire for freedom. The resistance was no longer just about human liberation. It was becoming something much larger and more dangerous to the established order. The alien authorities began to realize they faced a threat, unlike anything in their history. This was not just a local rebellion that could be crushed with superior firepower. This was the beginning of a galaxy-wide revolution. Ji-won received reports that hegemony forces were being recalled from frontier worlds to protect core systems. Trade routes were disrupted by resistance raids. Entire star sectors were declared too dangerous for civilian traffic. We are winning, Sung-hoon said during one of their planning sessions. No, Ji-won corrected him. We are just getting started. Real victory means every enslaved world is free. Every species chooses its own destiny. Every research station is destroyed forever. His staff looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. The scope of what he was proposing seemed impossible. The hegemony controlled thousands of worlds and had resources beyond counting. But they had also seen this young man accomplish things that should have been impossible. They had watched him survive torture that killed others. They had seen him turn certain defeat into stunning victory time after time. The Dragon Alliance, Ji-won said quietly. That is what we will call ourselves now. We are no longer just human resistance. We are every species that refuses to bow down to tyrants. The name spread quickly through their growing network. Within weeks, alien commanders across the galaxy were receiving reports about Dragon Alliance attacks. The symbol of the dragon began appearing on liberated worlds as a sign of hope and defiance. Ji-won stood before a gathering unlike any in galactic history. Representatives from over 40 different species filled the massive chamber hidden deep within an asteroid field. These were not diplomats or politicians, but warriors and survivors who had suffered under hegemony rule for generations. The Dragon Alliance had grown far beyond what anyone thought possible. What started as human resistance had become a galactic revolution that threatened the very foundations of the established order. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together under Jiwan's leadership. At 19 years old, Jiwan commanded respect that seasoned generals would envy. The experiments that were meant to break him had instead forged him into exactly what the galaxy needed: someone who understood tyranny intimately and refused to accept it anywhere. The hegemony believes we are just another rebellion that will burn out and fade away, Jiwan addressed the assembly. His voice carried clearly through translation devices that allowed all species to understand him. They have faced thousands of uprisings over the millennia. All have failed. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Many of these beings had ancestors who died in previous failed revolts against hegemony rule. The pattern always repeated. Initial success followed by crushing defeat and even harsher oppression. But we are different, Jiwan continued. We do not fight for just one world or one species. We fight for the principle that no being should be enslaved by another. This makes us stronger than any previous rebellion. Wanshik, who now served as Jiwan's strategic coordinator, stepped forward. The older human had been a military academy instructor before joining the resistance. His analytical mind helped turn Jiwan's instinctive tactical genius into systematic doctrine that could be taught to others. Intelligence reports confirm that hegemony forces are struggling to adapt to our multi-species approach, Wanshik reported. Their military doctrine is based on fighting enemies similar to themselves. They cannot predict our tactics when we combine the abilities of dozens different races. This was one of Jiwan's key innovations. Traditional warfare involved similar forces fighting using similar methods. Victory went to whoever had better equipment or more soldiers. The Dragon Alliance fought using combinations that no enemy could prepare for. Keth stealth scouts would identify targets. Morvac engineers would sabotage defenses. Zephyrian infiltrators would gather intelligence. Humans provided the unpredictable tactics that kept enemies off balance. Each species contributed their natural advantages to operations that no single race could accomplish alone. The hegemony is also facing internal problems, reported Yunji, who handled diplomatic relations with potential new allies. Several member species are questioning why they support an empire that seems unable to maintain order. The hegemony was not just the Velkari and their close allies. It was a complex structure that included hundreds of species in various levels of membership. Some were core members who shared in the benefits of conquest. Others were vassal states that provided resources and soldiers in exchange for protection. As Dragon Alliance victories mounted, these vassal species began to wonder if they were backing the losing side. Secret negotiations had begun with over a dozen hegemony members who were considering switching sides or at least remaining neutral in the growing conflict. But we have an even bigger advantage, Jiwan said, as he gestured toward a massive holographic display that showed research installations across the galaxy. We know their greatest secret. The display highlighted hundreds of facilities similar to the one where Jiwan had been tortured. Each contained detailed research on different species, including many that were supposedly loyal hegemony members. The implications were staggering. They have been experimenting on everyone, announced Kyungmin, the human xenobiologist who had analyzed captured hegemony data. Not just enslaved species, but their own allies. No one is safe from their research programs. This revelation had come from a daring raid on a hegemony database center. The intelligence gathered there showed that the empire's rulers trusted no one. They studied every species looking for weaknesses that could be exploited if those species ever became threats. Even core hegemony members had been secretly analyzed and cataloged. Their genetic material was stored. Their psychological profiles were documented. Plans existed for controlling or eliminating them if necessary. When this information becomes public, it will destroy the hegemony from within, Jiwan explained. Species that thought they were partners will realize they are just higher-class prisoners. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to defeat the hegemony through military force alone, the Dragon Alliance would expose the Empire's betrayal of its own members. Internal collapse would be far more effective than external conquest. Distribution networks are already in place, reported Changmin, who ran covert operations. We have contacts in every major hegemony world who can spread this information simultaneously. The Liao Bao network had taken years to build. It included everyone from government officials who secretly opposed the regime to ordinary citizens who had lost family members to hegemony policies. Each person would receive a small piece of the complete picture, ensuring that even if some were caught, others could complete the mission. What about military response? Asked Su Yung, who commanded the Alliance fleet. The hegemony will not collapse without fighting back. This was the dangerous part of the plan. When the information became public, there would be a period of chaos, as different factions within the hegemony turned on each other. During this confusion, hegemony military forces might lash out unpredictably at anyone they perceived as threats. That is why we must be ready for the largest military operation in our history, G1 replied. When the information releases, we launch simultaneous strikes on every major hegemony military installation within our reach. The scope of what he proposed was breathtaking. Coordinated attacks across dozens of star systems involving millions of Alliance fighters. It would require perfect timing and flawless execution. Any mistakes could result in catastrophic losses. The risk is enormous, Wanchik pointed out. If we fail, we will lose most of our forces and the movement will be finished. Jiwan nodded. But if we succeed, we end thousands of years of oppression across the entire galaxy. Some risks are worth taking. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. These beings came from worlds that had known nothing but submission for generations. Many had never imagined that freedom was possible until they heard about the Dragon Alliance. I will not lie to you, Jiwan said quietly. Many of us will die in the coming battle. The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for millennia, and they will not give up power easily. The chamber fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what they were planning. They were about to challenge the most powerful empire in galactic history, with forces that had been scraped together from the survivors of conquered worlds. But we have something they do not understand, G1 continued with growing intensity. We fight for each other. They fight only for themselves. We have learned to work together despite our differences. They cannot even trust their closest allies. A Keth warrior named Shadowpaw stepped forward. The dragon speaks truth. My people have served the hegemony for 800 years, believing we were honored allies. Now we learn we were just well-treated slaves being studied for future control. Similar statements came from representatives of other species. Each had their own story of betrayal and exploitation. Each had their own reasons for wanting to see the hegemony burn. Then we are agreed, Jiwan announced. In 1 month, we release all information simultaneously across every hegemony world. At the same moment, our fleets attack their key military installations. We either free the galaxy or die trying. The vote was unanimous. Every species representative agreed to commit their forces to the final campaign. Ships and soldiers that had been scattered across the galaxy would converge for the largest battle in recorded history. As the assembly dispersed to return to their home sectors and prepare for war, G1 remained in the chamber with his closest advisors. The weight of responsibility was enormous. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds were trusting their futures to his leadership. Do you really think we can win? Yunji asked quietly. G1 smiled, but his eyes held the same cold fire that had sustained him through years of torture. The hegemony created me by trying to break what could not be broken. They taught me everything. I needed to know about their weaknesses. They gave me the tools to destroy them. He gestured toward the star charts that showed hegemony territories stretching across the galaxy. They think their size makes them invincible, but size also makes them slow to adapt. We will hit them everywhere at once before they can respond effectively. And if they do adapt faster than expected, Wanchik asked. Then we adapt faster than them, Jiwan replied. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us free. We never stop changing and growing while they remain locked in, the same patterns that have worked for thousands of years. The Dragon Alliance was about to test whether flexibility could triumph over raw power, whether the spirit of freedom could overcome the weight of ancient oppression, whether one human boy's refusal to break could shatter an empire that had ruled. The stars since before Earth learned to dream of flight. In 1 month, the galaxy would have its answer. The day that would reshape galactic civilization began like any other in the hegemony capital system. Ships moved along established trade routes. Citizens went about their daily routines. Government officials attended their scheduled meetings. No one suspected that everything they knew was about to change forever. Ji-won stood on the bridge of his flagship watching as Alliance forces moved into position around dozens of key targets. At 21 years old, he commanded the largest military force ever assembled by free peoples. Ships from 40 different species formed attack formations that stretched across multiple star systems. "All units report ready," announced Changmin from the communications station. The coordination required for this operation was staggering. Millions of fighters from hundreds of different worlds had somehow managed to reach their assigned positions without detection. Intelligence networks. "Confirm information packages are loaded and ready for simultaneous release," reported Soo-young. The data that would expose the hegemony's betrayal of its own allies sat waiting in communication systems across the galaxy. Ji-won nodded to one sheikh who stood beside him monitoring tactical displays. His old mentor had become the finest military strategist the Alliance possessed. Together they had planned every detail of this campaign. "Execute Phase 1, Ji-won ordered. Across the galaxy, information packages activated simultaneously. Government networks received proof that their hegemony partners had been secretly studying them for weaknesses. Military databases revealed that invasion plans existed for every allied world. Research facilities showed evidence of genetic experiments on supposedly protected populations. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On the hegemony capital world, emergency sessions were called as member species demanded explanations for what they were seeing. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of allied worlds as trust turned to rage in a matter of hours. "Phase 1 complete," reported Changmin. "Hegemony communication networks are overloaded with crisis traffic. Their command structure is in complete chaos." This had been the key to Ji-won's strategy. The hegemony was powerful, but it was also brittle. It depended on rigid hierarchies and unquestioning loyalty. When trust collapsed, the entire system became paralyzed. "Execute Phase 2, Ji-won commanded. Alliance fleets struck simultaneously at military targets across hegemony space. The attacks were precisely coordinated to hit critical installations while avoiding civilian areas. Weapons depots exploded. Communication relays went dark. Fortress worlds found their defenses crumbling under assault by enemies who seemed to appear from nowhere. But the most important target was Research Station Alpha 1, the central facility, where the hegemony's most crucial experiments were conducted. This was where they stored genetic samples from every species in the galaxy. This was where they developed methods for controlling entire populations. Ji-won led the assault on Alpha 1 personally. As his fleet approached the massive station, he felt memories of his own captivity flooding back. This was where it all started. This was where the hegemony made their greatest mistake. "Defensive systems are activating," reported his tactical officer. "Energy shields at maximum strength. Weapon platforms coming online." The station was heavily defended as expected, but Ji-won had advantages the designers never anticipated. He knew their technology better than they did. He understood their tactical doctrine better than their own commanders. "All ships implement Pattern Dragon 7, he ordered. The Alliance fleet scattered into seemingly random formations. To hegemony observers, it looked like panic or inexperience. In reality, it was a complex attack pattern that Ji-won had developed specifically to counter their defensive systems. Ships attacked from multiple vectors using weapons designed to exploit specific weaknesses in hegemony shields. The defenses had been built to stop traditional fleet formations. They could not adapt quickly enough to handle the chaotic but coordinated assault that hit them. Within 2 hours, the station's defenses were breached. Alliance troops stormed through corridors that Ji-won remembered from his childhood nightmares. But now he was the hunter instead of the prey. They found thousands of prisoners in the research sections, beings from dozens of species who had been subjected to the same tortures that Ji-won had endured. Each rescued prisoner was another witness to hegemony crimes. In the central laboratory, Ji-won finally came face to face with Thrixaval, the Velkari scientist, who had overseen his years of suffering. The alien looked older and more desperate than Jiwan remembered. Gone was the arrogant confidence that had once filled his voice. Subject 24601, Thrixval said in recognition. You should not have survived. The experiments should have broken your mind completely. Jiwan studied his former torturer with eyes that held no fear. You were right about one thing. Those experiments did change me, but not in the way you intended. The alien scientist clutched a datapad containing decades of research. You do not understand what you are destroying. This knowledge could benefit your entire species. Knowledge gained through torture and murder, Jiwan replied coldly. I would rather my species remain ignorant than prosper through evil. For a moment, Thrixval looked genuinely confused. But power is the only thing that matters in the galaxy. The strong rule the weak. This is natural law. Jiwan shook his head. That is where you are wrong. The most powerful force in the galaxy is not strength or technology or numbers. It is the refusal to surrender what is right even when facing impossible odds. He gestured to the Alliance soldiers around him, representing dozens of different species working together as equals. You taught me that by trying to break something that cannot be broken. Now I have taught others. Instead of executing the alien scientist, Jiwan made a different choice. You will stand trial for your crimes. You will face justice from the beings you tortured. And if you survive that, you will help us heal the damage you have done. This was not what Thrixval expected. The hegemony way would have been simple execution or brutal revenge. But the Dragon Alliance represented something new. In galactic politics, justice instead of vengeance, healing instead of endless cycles of violence. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as Phase 2 continued. Hegemony fleets found themselves fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously. Their rigid command structure could not adapt to the speed and flexibility of Alliance tactics. More importantly, member species were declaring independence or switching sides entirely. The information releases had shattered trust so completely that the Empire was collapsing from within, even as it fought external enemies. Hegemony High Command is attempting to negotiate, reported Yunji from the diplomatic station. They are offering territorial concessions and prisoner releases. Jiwan considered this for a moment. Part of him wanted to accept any offer that would end the bloodshed. But he knew from bitter experience that tyrants only negotiated when they were losing, and would break any agreement the moment they regained strength. Tell them the terms are simple, he replied. Complete dissolution of the hegemony government, full independence for all member species, war crimes trials for those responsible for atrocities, and immediate release of all prisoners and slaves. These demands were far beyond what the hegemony could accept, while maintaining any semblance of power. Which was exactly the point. Jiwan was not interested in reforming the Empire. He intended to destroy it completely. The final phase of the campaign lasted 3 more months. Alliance forces systematically dismantled hegemony infrastructure while being careful to minimize civilian casualties. Research stations were destroyed, military installations were captured, government centers were occupied, but the most important victories were political rather than military. Species after species declared independence and applied to join the Dragon Alliance. The hegemony shrank from a galaxy-spanning empire to a handful of core worlds defending an ideology that fewer and fewer beings supported. The end came not with a massive battle, but with a simple surrender. Hegemony leadership realized they could no longer maintain control and agreed to dissolution rather than see their remaining worlds destroyed in futile resistance. Jiwan accepted the surrender aboard his flagship, surrounded by representatives from every species in the Alliance. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy to ensure everyone knew the age of hegemony rule was truly over. Today we have not just won a war, he announced to the assembled delegates and the watching galaxy. We have proven that tyranny is not inevitable. We have shown that different species can work together as equals. We have demonstrated that the strongest force in the universe is not the desire to dominate others but the willingness to sacrifice for their freedom. The words carried across space to billions of beings who had lived their entire lives under oppression. On worlds that had known only submission for generations, people dared to hope for something better. In the months that followed, G1 worked to establish a new form of galactic government. The Dragon Alliance became the Free Galactic Federation based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Each member species retained full sovereignty, while contributing to collective defense and mutual aid. The transition was not without challenges. Some former hegemony worlds struggled with concepts of democracy and individual rights. Others faced economic collapse as trade networks disrupted by war needed to be rebuilt. A few extremist groups tried to restart conflicts based on old grievances. But for every problem that arose, the Federation found solutions through cooperation and compromise. Species that had been enemies for centuries learned to work together. Technologies were shared freely rather than hoarded as weapons. Resources were distributed according to need rather than military power. The research stations where so many had suffered were converted into medical centers and schools. The genetic samples that had been collected for weapons development were used instead to cure diseases and enhance natural abilities. Knowledge that had been gained through torture was repurposed for healing. G1 himself found the transition difficult in unexpected ways. For over a decade, his entire existence had been focused on fighting the hegemony. Now that the enemy was defeated, he needed to learn how to live in peacetime. He established his headquarters on a world that had once been a major slave market. The planet was renamed Freedom and became the Federation capital. The symbolism was intentional. Where beings had once been bought and sold, they now came as equals to shape their shared future. On quiet evenings, G1 would walk through the memorial gardens that had been planted where the slave markets once stood. Monuments honored those who died fighting for freedom and those who suffered under oppression. His parents, Minsu and Hana, were remembered there along with countless others. Sometimes former enemies would approach him during these walks. Velkari scientists who had participated in the experiments, hegemony officials who had administered conquered worlds, military officers who had fought against the Alliance. Most expected punishment or revenge. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before. Forgiveness paired with accountability. G1 did not forget what they had done, but he offered them chances to make amends through service to their former victims. Why? Asked Thrixval during one such encounter. The former chief scientist now worked in a hospital treating beings he had once tortured for research. Because hatred is a poison that destroys the one who carries it, G1 replied. I spent years hating you and everything you represented. That hatred made me strong enough to survive and fight, but it would make me weak as a leader in peacetime. The alien scientist studied him with complex emotions. You have become something I did not think possible. A human who is truly civilized. G1 smiled at the irony. You helped make me what I am. Every experiment taught me something about strength and endurance. Every torture session showed me what I was fighting against. In trying to break me, you forged exactly the weapon needed to destroy your empire. As years passed, the Federation grew stronger and more stable. New species joined regularly as word spread about this unprecedented alliance of equals. Trade flourished. Science advanced rapidly through cooperation. Art and culture bloomed as different traditions mixed and evolved. But G1 never forgot the lessons learned in that research station so long ago. Military forces remained strong and ready to defend freedom wherever it was threatened. Intelligence networks monitored for signs of new tyrannies trying to emerge. The Federation was peaceful but not passive. On the 10th anniversary of the hegemony's fall, G1 stood before the Federation Assembly to deliver his annual address. Representatives from over 200 species filled the Great Hall. The diversity was stunning, but so was the unity of purpose that bound them together. We have accomplished something that many thought impossible, he said. We have created a galactic civilization based on freedom rather than fear. But our work is not finished. There are still worlds beyond our borders where beings suffer under oppression. There are still tyrants who dream of conquest. He paused to look around the hall at faces both familiar and strange. Some were old allies who had fought beside him in the early days. Others were former enemies who had chosen redemption over revenge. All were united now in common cause. We cannot force freedom on others, G1 continued. That would make us no better than those we defeated. But we can offer hope to the oppressed. We can provide sanctuary to those who flee tyranny. We can stand as living proof that there is another way to organize civilization. The address concluded with the traditional Federation oath that Jiwan had written in the early days of the new government. Every representative spoke the words together in their own languages, creating a harmony that would have been impossible under the old regime. We pledged to defend freedom for all beings regardless of species or origin. We promise to resolve conflicts through dialogue rather than violence. We commit to sharing knowledge for the benefit of everyone rather than hoarding it for advantage. We swear to remain vigilant against tyranny in all its forms. Later that evening, Jiwan returned to his private quarters overlooking the memorial gardens. The view had changed over the years as the planet healed from its dark past. Where slave pens once stood, there were now schools and hospitals. Where execution grounds had operated, there were parks where children of dozens of species played together. A soft chime announced a visitor. Yuna entered carrying tea and wearing the uniform of a Federation admiral. She had become one of Jiwan's closest advisors and friends over the years. More than anyone else, she understood what he had sacrificed to reach this point. "You look tired," she said as she poured tea for both of them. Jiwan accepted the cup, gratefully. "Sometimes I wonder if we have really won or just delayed the next cycle of violence." "Do you regret what we accomplished?" Yuna asked. "Never," Jiwan replied immediately. "But I worry about what happens when those who remember the hegemony are gone. Will future generations value freedom enough to defend it?" Yuna smiled. "You trained them well. The Federation military academies teach your tactical doctrines. The schools tell stories about the Dragon Alliance. Every child grows up learning that freedom requires constant vigilance." She was right, of course. The institutions they had built were designed to preserve the values that had driven their revolution. But institutions were only as strong as the people who maintained them. Besides, Yuna added with a grin that reminded him of their younger days fighting together, "You are not that old yet. You have decades left to keep annoying tyrants across the galaxy." Jiwan laughed for the first time in weeks. Even in his position as Federation leader, he remained at heart the same person who had refused to break under alien torture, the same person who had turned suffering into strength and hatred into determination. The boy who had been taken from a Korean farm to serve as an experimental subject had become the man who broke an empire and forged a new kind of civilization. The experiments meant to create a perfect slave had instead produced the perfect liberator. As night fell over freedom, Jiwan stood at his window looking up at stars that now represented hope rather than oppression. Somewhere out there, beings still suffered under tyrannical rule. Somewhere, dictators still dreamed of conquest. Somewhere, the next generation of heroes was being forged in the fires of adversity. The dragon had taught the galaxy that freedom was possible. Now it was up to others to carry that flame forward into whatever challenges the future might bring. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun. And in quiet moments like this, Jiwan could almost hear his parents' voices carried on the wind telling him they were proud of what their little boy had become.